The great Frances Perkins, FDR's labor secretary, once said, "A government should aim to give all the people under its jurisdiction the best possible life." That's it. That's the job. That's what we're here to do. And I cannot stand here and say we're done yet. Because even though we've set the table for what should be the most prosperous time in New York history, if New Yorkers don't feel safe in their communities, if they can't afford to buy a home or pay their rent, then the dream stays out of reach for them. And we're already seeing signs of outmigration that we can no longer ignore, something I know all too well from growing up in Western New York, at times when jobs were so hard to find. We cannot let that happen again. But the good news is, it does not have to be that way. What I'll discuss today is a broad overview of key policies that will make New York more affordable, more livable, and safer. So let me tell you just how we plan to do that. My number one priority has always been and always will be keeping New Yorkers safe. And a day has not gone by where I've not been laser focused on this objective. Oh, the pandemic caused so much havoc in our state, in our country, in society, and it had a profound effect on public safety. You know, that pervasive unease that wormed its way into our day-to-day lives, the social isolation, the economic distress, led to a nationwide rise in gun crimes and violence that we're still combating. And to respond to what we saw right here in New York, we had to develop new strategies and invest in new programs and strengthen our gun violence prevention laws, passing even stronger ones and closing loopholes, like banning ghost guns. And I want to thank our Attorney General for her work on making sure that the red flag laws are executed. We expanded bail eligibility for gun crimes. We had tougher prosecutions of gun trafficking. As I mentioned, the red flag laws. We had over 5,000 extreme risk orders of protection, astronomically higher than before. You know what that meant? 5,000 people who should not have had a gun because they could have done harm somewhere else were prevented. And that kept innocent people from being hurt. Those are the strategies that are working. We also, after the massacre in my hometown, we raised the age to 21 to buy a semi-automatic weapon, just common sense. We launched the first in the nation, 9 states, first time in history, 9 states working on gun trafficking and gun interdiction. That effort took over 10,000 illegal guns off our streets. We tripled our investments in gun violence disruption programs on the street, connecting people where they are. And we've collaborated with local governments like never before. From putting more cops on the subways, working with the mayor, to working to bring down barriers in places like Rochester and Syracuse. So stakeholders are finally working together, and our efforts are starting to pay off. Last year, we saw a double-digit decrease in both homicides and shootings, but we're still far from pre-pandemic levels, so our work is not done. And there has been no aspect around the discussion of public safety more controversial than bail reform. And as with so much in politics today, the conversation quickly turns to a debate between 2 opposing camps with no common ground. But I believe there are several things we can agree upon. First, that the size of someone's bank account should not determine whether or not they sit in jail or go home, even before they've been convicted of a crime. That was the goal of bail reform. It was a righteous one, and I stand by it. Second, bail reform is not the primary driver of a national gun wave. or crime wave. It was created by a convergence of factors, including the pandemic, all across the nation. But also, I would say we can agree that the bail reform law as written leaves room for improvement. And as leaders, we cannot ignore that. When we hear so often from New Yorkers that their top concern is crime. And so to my partners in government, in the legislature, let's start with this base of shared understanding and have a thoughtful conversation. Not this, but this. And talk about what we can do during the budget process and make improvements to that law. Of course, we know that that won't automatically bring down crime rates. We don't expect that. We also have to make sure the law is clear for our judges and what their rights are and what their expectations are. But at the same time, we're going to continue making record investments in areas where it affects the outcomes: education, housing, mental health. All of these go towards stabilizing communities and addressing historic inequities. Those investments must continue. And I'm also proposing the largest investment ever in the state's gun-involved violence elimination initiative, known as GIVE. It saves lives. It saves lives in the communities hardest hit by gun violence. To simply put it, we're working on investing in what we know works. Shootings in Buffalo are down 32%. Mayor Brown, you know this. You're working hard. In Long Island, they're down 29%. In Westchester, down 27%. These are all GIVE program jurisdictions. We're putting state money to help our locals on the ground. I've also directed our state police to play a more direct role, as they started last year. But there's more they can do. We're going to increase the ranks of our state police in combating violent crime across communities. We're going to expand the state police community stabilization units to 25 targeted communities across the state.